Back to spring of 2009. What a long, strange trip it's been, as they say.
Ann Arbor 2009 Mini Maker Fair. Your shirt, does that have anything to do with I3 Detroit?
That's why I picked this shirt. Ann Arbor Mini Maker Fair 2009 was our first big break. So prior to that, there had been... Okay, so let me rewind to the super prehistory. There had been a couple of other attempts to start hackerspaces or makerspaces, and I'm not going to get into the definitions of the terms right now, in the Detroit area. And none of them had amounted to anything. There were some, groups of friends that couldn't get the money together and gave up. There were some, kind of private folks who tried to open up and decided not to, and a couple of other efforts that never got off the ground. And what was different about I3 was just who started it. There was a fellow named Russ Wolf who read an article in Wired magazine about hackerspaces, and he was just blown away because it was talking about Noise Bridge and HackDC and Pumping Station 1 and
Are these early?
The very early, the ones that were existing in spring of 2009 for Wired to write an article about them. And those had all been kind of spawned by the outgrowth of a trip organized in 2007. I think it was 2007. Over to the Chaos Communication Congress in Germany, because the theme that year was hackerspaces, which have been a thing in Europe for decades. And there was...
really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Chaos Communication Club goes back to the 70s, I believe. I should look that up.
I'd be curious to know more.
But... They really weren't a thing in the U.S. It's like you had the Loft out in Boston, and you had, arguably, MITRES at MIT could be considered a hackerspace, but you kind of have to be a student, kind of, sort of. So, hackerspaces in their modern form didn't exist in the U.S., and there were a couple folks who were kind of in communication with a bunch of German hackers and said, oh my God, this is something we need to bring to the U.S. How do we do this? We bring a bunch of Americans to this Congress and see, because that was the theme, and get,
What is the Chaos Congress?
The Chaos Communications Congress.
I love that.
Is a conference really put on by the Chaos Communications Club, and we get people excited about this, and we let them go back to the U.S. and see what they do. And so one of the folks who was instrumental, I think the person who was instrumental in putting that trip together, dragging people over there, getting everybody enthused about this, was a fellow by the name of Nick Farr, who was one of the early, he had been around the Ann Arbor 2600 meetings forever. He was a UMich student, and so Nick and I know each other going way back. And so he was fundraising for... post Hackers on a Plane, he was fundraising for HackDC at Nauticon in Cleveland. And I was helping him, go to Home Depot and try to convince them to sell me an empty Absapure jug to be their reservoir of dollar bills as people contributed. And then HackDC turned into a thing. They actually started it. It became a real space. And
is that the first one in the country that you would call a hackerspace?
No, I think the Loft really deserves that title. They were the 0th generation or negative 1th generation.
But after this Congress?
After Chaos, I think Noise Bridge and HackDC, I think, started up at right around the same time, and I believe there were a couple of others. I think Pumping Station 1 also started up around the same time.
Are any of them still around?
All of them.
All of them?
I've visited Pumping Station 1 years ago.
Where is it?
Chicago. They've moved since I was there, so I need to go back. That would be fun to organize a field trip. I was at Noise Bridge just recently, 2 summers ago. And I haven't been to HackDC since 2009 or 10. So it's time to go back. But like, you know, because I knew Nick and he was starting Hack DC, I went down there because I was between jobs at the time. I just went down and couch surfed with him for like weeks.
It doesn't sound like couch surfing. That sounds like you crashed on his couch for weeks.
What? Yeah, I
Yeah.
crashed on his couch for weeks.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah. You know, like they had this mountain of junk that everyone had donated, meaning cleaned out their basements, and
Right.
I, you know, kind of sorted through it and helped. You know, like I like bringing order to chaos. That's kind of like my jam, and kind of helped sort that out and turn it into piles of useful things that you could go pull a useful thing out of to make a project with. And skipping ahead in time a little bit, some of that very same organization system of like figuring out how to organize electronic junk persists in i3's electronics lab to this day. But anyway, so back in 2007, these spaces existed, and Wired was able to write an article about them in, I think, 2008 or early 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And then Russ Wolf read this article and said, oh my God, we totally need one of those in Detroit. Why don't we have one of those in Detroit? Went on hackerspaces.org, like shot an email to everyone who had previously, you know, tried to start one, because we all had entries on the page there.
Oh. Is that, you didn't know him before that? You
No.
connected through the website?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, hackerspaces.org is like the genesis of so much. And to this day, the directory is of spaces that consider themselves hackerspaces enough to put themselves on that directory. I think it's the prime resource. But anyway, Russ reached out to a bunch of people and said, hey, I'm going to try to start a hackerspace in Detroit. You know, like, we've settled it, you know, we meaning he and Jamie, his wife, had settled on the name i3 Detroit, like imagine, innovate, inspire, sounds nice. Registered the domain name. And
I wonder how many other names they went through.
I have no idea. I would love to ask Russ that.
Let's try this weekend.
Yes, let's reach out to him.
Okay. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
Anyway, and he says, we're going to be, you know, meeting at the Coffee Beanery on Woodward, and, you know, if you could show up, it'd be awesome.
That doesn't exist anymore.
No, it turned into a Firehouse Subs, and that doesn't exist anymore.
Right? It's just an empty space.
But, yeah, we've outlived a lot of things, but... So a whole bunch of people from these other Detroit efforts and you know, some friends and so on showed up at the Coffee Beanery, and we started having these weekly meetings. And that was early April 2009.
Were they on Tuesdays?
Yes.
Yes. So, just as an aside, one time you've told me about Tuesdays, why it's always Tuesday, why?
There's a list of what they call design patterns on the hackerspaces.org wiki, and some of them are cautionary tales about, you know, having someone who lives at the space and you know, stuff like that, and some of them are you know, kind of tongue-in-cheek, and one of the ones that I consider mostly tongue-in-cheek just says, have your meetings on Tuesday. All days are equally bad. Someone will be able to not make it on whatever day you choose, so just choose Tuesday.
Okay.
And so many spaces do, like...
But so many other things do too, I've noticed. So I was wondering if it was a bigger phenomenon that people chose Tuesdays.
I have no idea where it came from.
No, okay.
But,
all right. Sorry.
Yeah, so the meetings were on Tuesdays, I believe.
At the Coffee Beanery.
At the Coffee Beanery. And... There were a couple of really crucial elements that I think Russ did differently than the previous efforts.
How many people came to these meetings?
I'd say maybe a dozen.
Oh.
7 to 10 sometimes,
Okay.
and sometimes we filled the whole corner of the thing.
So what did Russ do differently?
He understood, mind you, like, this is pre-Kickstarter. Kickstarter started up in September, October of 2009. So we're back in April, and the idea of crowdfunding isn't really, like, the term hasn't been invented yet. But Russ understood the idea that people will contribute money towards something that they believe in, even if it doesn't exist yet. this was something that other groups had not done. Like, I tried to start one, and it was just, okay, how much money do I have, and Barry has, and Paul has, and, like, what can we afford to throw in? And the numbers didn't work. Whereas somebody brought one of those big inter-office mail envelopes, the yellow manila envelopes to the coffee beanery.
Oh.
And that was our early, what do you got?
Oh, someone just said Chicago. Woo!
Oh, yeah. Hello, Chicago. They brought one of those inter-office mail envelopes that has like the 100 little blank lines down
Yeah,
the
so you
side.
could say who you sent it to.
Yeah, and so what we did with it is we used it as a running register of how much money was in the envelope. Everybody would throw in, $5, $10, $20, and then, some down to the next line.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to take this moment for a commercial break. This weekend, we are matching donations up to $10,000, and that donation will be matched by the Michigan...
The Economic Development Corporation, MEDC.
Right? So if you gave $10 today, that would end up being $40 for I-30. Okay.
Oh, that's right, because the donor doubles it, and then the MEDC. But only if we hit our target does the MEDC kick in their match.
Right. So we need to get to $50,000.
We need to get 50.
And only you can help. We don't have an inter-office envelope, but there is a donation link below.
And then we have this thermometer on the stream that shows like our current donation total.
Oh yeah. And it has gone up this evening.
Hell yeah! Thank you, if whoever has donated to that. If you're watching, thank you. Yeah, and that was just it. It was this, everybody throws in $10 or $20, every week especially, and this running total by the time we got to the second or third column of lines on envelope, it was huge. It was like $1,000, and that started to feel real in the way that a lot of other things hadn't. And so when it's time to pay the website hosting or file the articles of incorporation or any of
What about
those,
finding a space?
And that was just it. Any of those little expenses, and then it starts to be enough money to look at big stuff like first month's rent. And so there were a couple of other things that we did differently that I3 did differently, which was one of them was sitting around in a coffee shop week after week talking about bylaws and stuff does get boring. And so somebody, I wish I knew who, said, let's just build something.
Yeah. And I love this story.
Yeah, so we started meeting at Matt Switlick's garage. He's got a decent garage, and it wasn't all full of junk. And so, we set up some tables, and we sat around and got a bunch of cheap toothbrushes and cut the heads off, and a bunch of little vibrate motors, like pager motors, and coin cell batteries to make BristleBots, which I was not enthused for this. It's like, BristleBots are the dumbest thing. They're wasteful. They don't actually teach you much if you know what electricity is. But it turned out, and I'm glad to be proven wrong on this, it turns out that when you have more than 2 or 3 BristleBots going at one time on a table, and they're all skittering around and bumping into each other and falling off the table, it's hilarious.
And that counts for something. There is about fun and play in making.
And there were some folks who had actually never soldered before. Okay, so there is some teaching going on and working together and having fun, and just that, the laughter. I think there were a couple of beers being consumed at the time and so on. It was a good time that reinforced the idea that we were pretty sure that working together on projects would feel good, and it does. And that validated and motivated really substantially. And so it's like, okay, guys, we got to look for a space. And a lot of landlords wanted nothing to do with this. We had no credit, no Dun and Bradstreet number, anything like that.
Pause there.
Yes.
Greg or whomever is at the controls, I really hope you're recording this because I would love to watch it back later.
I'm pretty sure YouTube's recording it. I don't know.
No, YouTube is not.
What?
No. We're on a live stream.
Yeah.
But they have the option to be recording it.
Oh, well, whatever. We'll figure it out later.
I just think it's real. I think your storytelling is intriguing, and it would be good for posterity to have it.
Well, then I hope we have it.
So, you were at nobody wanted anything to do with us because we have no credit and only a certain amount of money. And
Well, that just meant we had to shop around for a different kind of landlord. Like the kind of under the table. We found a place that had previously been rented by an artist who was using it as studio space, and they were actually living in their studio space too. And so, this is the kind of place where the landlord didn't necessarily mind.
yeah.
And that turned out to be like a really great space. It was just outside of downtown Royal Oak. So it was like equidistant between a hardware store and a brewery.
Is that where you showed me?
Yeah. Yeah, we went there the other day.
Yeah.
Directly across the street from an art gallery. Really cool location,
Yeah.
but far enough out of downtown to be affordable. And it was a total little hole in the wall. You couldn't see it
It's tucked back. Like you would have to walk down an alley to get to the garage. Did that act as the door?
There was also a person door on the side. But
Yeah.
whenever the weather was decent, we'd open the garage door and we had a big banner hung inside, so you'd see it like in the door. But so the landlord's name was Ken, and he was pretty cool. He was a photographer himself, and actually like the building next door is his studio. And it was really neat. There was actually an air compressor in that space, because I guess after the artist moved out, then the sign shop across the street had been using it as extra space for their big laminator, and they moved their laminator out, but they had a big air compressor to support the laminator, and they were like, "Do you want to buy this so we don't have to move it out?" And we're like, "Yes."
Why does the space need an air compressor? If
For all of our tools. I mean, even at that time, we had substantial, everybody was bringing in whatever tools they didn't need at home, and so there was, air wrenches and nibblers and all sorts of stuff.
What was the first big purchase with community funds in terms of tools or things?
That's a good question.
Thanks.
Meaning it's one I'm going to have trouble answering.
I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm really not.
No, that's a super. I think the air compressor would have to be it.
But that came with the building.
Well, it was a separate check to a separate group.
But it was still already there. What was the first thing you guys kind of said? Like, all right, we need this.
I will think of that at some point. I don't have that off the top of my head. In the early days, almost everything was brought in by members, and so we had a nice table saw. And it was Russ's table saw. It wasn't actually that nice in retrospect, but it was nice at the time. It was like, guys, we got a table saw. I think it was this Hitachi fold-up portable contractor saw that Russ had. But that's how we cut all of the lumber and stuff for renovating the first space. The fancy sewing machine was Nick's. It was like, you can make sailcloth, kites, and all sorts of heavy-duty stuff on this big machine, but that wasn't space-owned. All of the electronics and stuff, some of that was mine, some of that was Ed's, some of that was, all sorts of people's. It wasn't really group-owned tools at all in the early days.
How many people belonged to this space? And did you have a membership role, or did you solicit memberships, or were people paying dues, or was it just the original founding group all sharing their tools?
So there were quite a few people who had been involved kind of around the periphery in the coffee shop days. Like, this is interesting, but it's not really at the point where I want to get involved yet. Call me when you get a space.
How about you call us?
Well, but there were a lot of people who, as soon as we actually signed the lease and said, okay, all you folks who said, now we're cleaning, we're doing renovations, we're fixing the incredibly messed up wiring in this building, so on and so forth. They did. They actually came out. They showed up in force and brought tools and energy and skills, and we made that from chaos into, it looked like a fancy art gallery in a matter of weeks, because we signed the lease on, I think, Labor Day weekend or just prior to Labor Day weekend. And then we had our grand opening to the public in October 3rd. So, we had a month and a half to renovate the place. Maybe not even, calendar, but it happened where the folks who had like been through all of the coffee shop meetings and done all of that were probably a third of the total number that went, like that were counted as members when we actually had the grand opening. I think
Really?
we went from probably 15 to about 40, I think, very quickly. Because it was word of mouth, people's friends and stuff like that really like came out and said, yes, I do want this, I will contribute to this, very quickly. And then by the time, I want to say at the end of our first year, we were probably around 60 or 70. So there was that big initial bump and then kind of steady growth after that.
Interestingly, the number has stayed below, hasn't it? Below like 125 or 150. Has there not been sort of a cap that's been steady?
Well, there's never been an official cap, but if you chart the numbers, and I haven't done this recently, but basically there was pretty steady growth. We were, I think, when we moved, which is the next part of the story I'll get to. When we moved,
The
we
next
were
part of the story I'll ask you about.
at about yes. Well, I mean it follows.
No, you have to remember to ask about moving.
We were at about 80 members when we moved, and then I think it really plateaued around 100 for a long time. We sat around the 100, 110, and then I don't know what caused the next uptick. Like something broke that barrier, and we've been gaining again.
And that's recent.
It is fairly recent.
Yeah.
I don't know how recent, but
Be interesting to know. Maybe
Uh,
something to figure out this weekend.
Yeah,
Maybe 4:30 a.m. on a Saturday. We could start to look at the membership numbers.
yeah, I don't know if they're being kept in the format that I know how to query anyway, but
All right, so we're on the history of I3.
Mhm.
Let's move it. How long were you at the first space?
I3, so not very long in retrospect. Long enough to really have a lot of good times there. But around March of the following spring,
Which would be 2000.
which would be 2010,
Yeah.
so it turns out that I3 was a very different tenant than anyone who had rented that space before. When you figure that immediately prior there was, the sign shop was just using it as shop space for their laminator, and prior to that was some artist who was living in the space and definitely wanted to fly below the radar with that. Everybody was really quiet about what they were doing there. Whereas I3 was like writing press releases and putting together packets with, membership information and all that, and like handing them to the mayor when he came to do our ribbon cutting for our grand opening, and very, very public and,
Out there.
welcoming the wider community in and all that. And, oh, by the way, we had the mayor of Royal Oak do our ribbon cutting for grand opening.
Really?
There's a video out there somewhere of, and I think he's a senator or a representative now in the Michigan legislature.
Who is it?
Now. Jim Ellison.
Okay. I don't know.
But we're doing ribbon cutting, and of course it wouldn't be any plain old ribbon. It was ribbon cable, like 40 conductor copper ribbon cable.
I know, shoot.
Stretched across the garage door. And we weren't going to cut it with scissors or anything. We were going to use oxyacetylene cutting torch.
Ah.
So yeah. So Nick owns the Oxy rig, and he's like getting Mayor Ellison suited up with like the gloves and the goggles and everything, and like showing him how to operate the torch. And the mayor goes, "Oh no, I know how to do this. I used to be a fabricator." And we're like, "What?" Yeah. Dude totally knew how to handle the torch and everything. It was great.
That's awesome.
He stayed around the grand opening party way later than he needed to, just having a ball, talking to everybody, checking out the equipment and everything.
And it's still like that at I3. You can come in and find people doing things and find a place to hang out no matter who you are. I remember when I took my tour to a year and a half ago, I was here for like 3 hours.
You
I
get
mean,
sucked in.
I got sucked in, and it's easy to do in a space where people have that energy and they are just creating.
Well, and open too. I mean, you don't come here to be, private and insular. You work in your own basement or garage if you want to be private about it. You come here because you find this environment of a lot of other creative people to be energizing. And so it's kind of, I think it self-selects for that kind of energy.
I don't know if that's always true though, because for instance, I come for the equipment that I don't have at home, the plotter and the computer, but I'm still able to do my own thing, without interacting with other members of the community, my project. But it's nice to be in a space where there are other people. So I feel like there are people who come in to use the equipment, but it's a different environment than you would find if it was just a tool library or
you could go to Kinko's and use a plotter,
exactly.
But it wouldn't have the same vibe.
Right. So you guys had this great big grand opening.
Yeah.
But then why are we not still in that space?
And so the mayor, who was very enthusiastic about this group, takes one of these PR packets back to City Hall, and he's like, "Guys, check out what's in our city. Like, this is so cool." And it goes around the city offices, and it gets to the planning department.
What? I don't know this, truly.
and somebody goes, "Well, check this out. This thing's right over on 4th Street." Oh yeah, 322 East 4th Street. There is no 322 East 4th Street. What is that? Have we ever inspected 322 East 4th Street? I don't think so. And it turns out there was no 322. It turns out the landlord, like 30 years ago, had just picked the next number in the sequence. It's like 320, 324... 322. Hung the numbers on the side of the building, like bricked up, put up cinder block to cut the building in half, made up the rear suite. And
that's what you were renting.
That's what we were renting, and nothing had ever been done to code.
Right.
And so
not only did it not exist, but there was no way to expect, you inspect it and it's all just hodgepodge.
And it was like, we had fixed an awful lot. We had made it safe. But, it's like bringing it to code would have required tearing everything down.
Which is what we're trying to do for our building here, which is going to take $100,000, which is why we need you to contribute to our fundraiser.
Oh my God, we need it.
He says, oh my God, we need it.
Like we're trying not to have this happen again.
Right.
But yeah, so the planning department, like the fire inspector comes out and he's like, okay, don't store stuff up there and, do this and this and this. And he was actually pretty cool. But he says, I can't sign off on that loft until the building inspector gets a look at it. So we schedule that. The building inspector comes out and goes, that's not a sound you ever want to hear from a city inspector. Like, that's never going to fly. But like the loft, which was the point of contention, was like contributing an awful lot of square footage that if we were minus that, take down the loft, we totally weren't going to fit. We already didn't really fit in that space. We had filled it to the gills. And we're like, we got to go. We didn't create this situation.
But you didn't want to be a part of it either.
But we also couldn't fix it. Like, it was just not going to work. So the problem was that we were now, it turns out there's this thing called a certificate of occupancy that you need before you can, like, use a building that you're renting, and we didn't have one of those. Because no one had ever had one of those in this space for like 30 years.
Because it doesn't exist.
Yeah. That's just it. The space was like imaginary almost. And but suddenly we were on the radar as occupying the space without a C of O. And the fine for occupying a commercial building without a certificate of occupancy is $700 a day.
Is it really? In Royal Oak?
And so we begged and pleaded with the mayor's office. Can you ask them to withhold that fine?
It's his fault anyway. He's the one who went and got all excited and showed everyone the packet. Like,
well, you know,
Jim
it's our fault
Ellison, we love you, and we hope you come visit us. But
oh, that'd be great,
wouldn't it?
Yeah, I should call him up.
Do you have his number?
Well, I mean, we can look it up on his website. You know, he's Representative Ellison now, but I'm sure he's around.
Should we do it now?
After the stream, or after the interview.
I always want to do it now.
Well, I don't think there's anybody in the office at on a Friday night. But anyway, where was I? Oh, we got them to withhold the fine, like until the end of the month.
Okay.
So that would give us a couple weeks to find a new space and move.
And that was this.
That was this space.
And how did you find it?
Craigslist.
No kidding.
Yeah, we found everything we've ever done on Craigslist. Like,
really?
Yeah, it's incredible.
And so it all happened like within a month.
Super fast. Yeah, it was like we found this building, took a brief look at it, said, wow, it's big, we can actually kind of afford it almost, we'll be really close to being able to afford it, it would
Were
suit our
you
users
already
pretty well.
charging dues? Did you have that set? Yeah.
Oh, from day one, yeah. But the most crucial thing was the landlord here, John, was able to say, yeah, I will go, get the certificate of occupancy, get the emergency exit lights and all that sort of stuff the space needs so that it's move-in ready and like lickety-split. And he was able to do that.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. Yeah. And no offense to Ken. I mean, that
Ken's genius.
Like,
Ken made a space that didn't even exist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for those meddling kids. But it was just that,
What was this space before?
So years and years ago, it was like a manufacturing plant. They had like screw machines and stuff in here, where they're taking like raw steel bar stock and turning it into fasteners. Which is why if you're ever up in the rafters and there's like a random steel rod hanging in the rafters that like a light is hung from, it's because that was just the stock they had sitting around to do things with. And so, whenever we would take down those radial lights, we'd pull the steel rod stock down and put it in the metal shop to use as stock because it's good rod. But then that was way back, and then when they moved out, I don't know if there were any other intermediate tenants, but the landlord, John, had a bunch of his buddies like storing their boats and
I was going to say, what did it look like when
stuff.
you saw it for the first time? Or
there are photos. I will
link them below.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that. I know you can't edit the YouTube description while we're streaming, but I could throw a link in chat later.
We'll figure it out.
Because I have all these photos on my Flickr of what was in this building when we first toured. So there was like a Bobcat front end loader parked actually right where we're sitting. There were several boats. John races Thistles. The Thistle is a small sailboat class.
Where are we sitting?
We're sitting. Oh yeah, so we're sitting in the Fab Lab. Which is like the quietest place we could find, which is why we're here.
But there is still a small child, I believe, under the age of 3, right on the other side of the door, and I can hear the whole evening going on. Friday nights are really busy here. It's super fun.
Yeah.
But Fab Lab's quietest.
Fab Lab has walls so that it's a humidity-controlled environment, so the 3D printer filament doesn't get all hygroscopic, swelled up, and nasty. And because of that, it has good walls, and then it's nice and quiet. So that's why we're here.
It's also one of the cleanest spaces, too, because it is protected. Mm-hmm. Is that important for 3D printing? Probably, right?
Dust will, clog nozzles and stuff. I don't know. I would imagine dust is bad in the resin machine, too, but it's covered, so.
Off topic. How did zones come about?
Zones, okay, so there's kind of 2 questions there. One is like the organization of materials and tools into zones, and that's fairly natural. That was just organic, like similar tools got grouped together, and electronics everybody knows that electronics doesn't like dust, and wood creates a lot of dust, so those should be not near each other. They both use screwdrivers, so maybe we should have 2 sets of screwdrivers, that kind of thing. That was, I don't think anyone ever even explained that. It was just
yeah, it doesn't need
automatic.
explaining.
But the concept of zone coordinators, of having an individual who's like responsible for each zone and kind of actually dividing them up and saying you are responsible for this, that happened after. There kind of always were individuals who care a lot and spend a lot of time kind of caretaking of a particular set of tools and a set of materials.
Is that because they own them?
Sometimes it was because they own them, sometimes it was because they use them a lot, sometimes it was just because it was something that brought them joy to, to come and clean and sort and organize or whatever. And once in a while, somebody would do a lot of that, like spend all weekend, cleaning up the weld zone and putting things away and figuring out what kind of rod we had and all that sort of stuff and making it awesome. And then, they would go home and get some sleep, and somebody else would come in and reorganize the whole thing.
That sounds like someone I know.
Well, but this was suboptimal, and so what we did is we came up with a way of recognizing that kind of long-term commitment and energy and responsibility and stewardship that certain individuals were showing, and we recognized them with a title and said it's everyone's job to put things away when they're done using them, but it's the zone coordinator's job to define what away means. And then as we started getting more responsible with our money and doing budgets and things like that, the zone coordinators were natural points of focus to say, okay, if we're going to have money allocated to a particular zone, they're the best person to figure out how to spend it or to request budget for various things. That came about very organically, but the title was specifically so that we didn't just have to say very vaguely, try to respect the other people that put more time into the stuff than you do.
But that's a thing.
Yeah.
That really is a thing.
It is a thing, and it was hard to say without a title, so we made up a title.
Zone coordinator.
And
so,
other spaces...
I was just going to ask about that. Other spaces. Well,
other spaces have a... if not identical, a very similar system. They'll call them, zone captains or points of contact.
Question. Did you borrow this idea from other spaces? I mean, what was your interaction with other spaces like as I3 was kind of developing? Or do you guys feel like...
Spotty.
Yeah.
Like our waiver that you sign when you come in the door... that's like straight up lifted from Pumping Station 1, because one of their founding members was actually a lawyer who drew up a waiver that might actually be legally not nonsense. And we asked her, can we borrow this? And she says, well, I'm not licensed to practice in Michigan, but sure.
Yeah. It's a good waiver too. I mean, it protects us, it protects the people.
Yeah. And so there's that, and then like I said, our some of our organization scheme was kind of imported from HackDC and stuff.
And that's what I was asking though. For just zone coordinators, you started talking about what other spaces call them, and I was wondering, did you come up with them? Did we come up with them, or
I have no idea.
Maybe it just happens organically.
I think that one just happened.
Yeah.
I would imagine that it happens organically in a lot of other places too. And everybody seems to have their own name for them, like Familab in Orlando, well, technically Altamani Springs. Hello, Florida.
I think that's his favorite makerspace. I mean, weird.
It's the one I visit most often.
Yeah. And he loves their Slack. I love their Slack.
You're on their Slack?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Anyway... more on that later. Anyway, Familab calls them points of contact. And so each zone has their little poster that says who the POC is for that zone. Dallas has a really interesting way of doing it. Dallas, I know, like used a lot of our stuff for inspiration but didn't borrow it directly. They like really thoughtfully improved it as they set up their organization and roles. They don't have zones, they have committees. And so like the electronics committee runs the electronics lab. The woodshop committee runs the woodshop. And so what we would call a zone coordinator is just the committee chair.
So, but actually, Thomas has kind of taken it back to committees, Thomas Tusano, who does our wood shop, because he became the zone coordinator, but then he asked for people to take responsibility for like
individual
each
tools
of the tools. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that, I thought that was so smart. I thought that was such a great way to keep 15, 16 people involved all the time, but also, you know, when those tools, when something goes wrong with them,
there's a ton of stuff back there.
There's a ton of stuff
too much
back
for
there.
one person.
Yeah, and training people on them is, I mean, it's really not a one-person job, and he knew that and asked for other people. I thought that's a step in a different direction, or at least that I've seen since being here. Kind of opening a zone coordinator up to a zone committee.
Yeah.
As it were.
Yeah, we're not calling it a committee, but it's kind of that structure kind of emerging again. And I think Dallas hit the nail on the head with that, because there's
What's the Dallas Makerspace called?
Dallas Makerspace.
That's what you're calling it, Dallas. Okay.
Yeah, because there's stuff like in Robert's Rules of Order, committee chairs report out at meetings, and so there's just this built-in expectation that you hear from your zone coordinators at meetings. Whereas here, you know, some zone coordinators are quite happy to tell us what's going on with their zone at every meeting. And some it's like pulling teeth to get them to understand that they're supposed to tell the rest of the membership what's going on in their zone. Because we've been trying to make that expectation, but it's not automatic the way it is when they're committees. And so I think like Dallas really nailed a lot of little nuances like that. And sometime if we ever redo our rules and stuff like that, I'd like to re-import some of their ideas.
That's what I was going to ask you about next, is what spaces has I3 borrowed from, and what spaces have borrowed from I3? So
it's difficult, if not impossible, to have a complete list of all of that, but one example that I know really well is our system of parking permits and parking tickets. So I don't know of the people watching the stream right now, or of the people who might be...
Someone from Hackerspace Brisbane in Australia.
Hello, Brisbane!
Hello, Australia! Sorry to interrupt you, but I just get really excited because they're across the world.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's probably like early morning there, so, you know...
No, it's like 11 a.m. on Saturday, right? They're exactly opposite.
Probably. I don't know which time zone, but
anyway, parking permits, parking tickets. So
parking permits and parking tickets arose out of the massive clutter problem that we had circa like 2010, 11 after moving here.
And people...
Part of the problem of moving in such an absolute hurry, because like the negotiation and landlord and all that sort of stuff, real estate, rent, took up most of the time that we had, and we had like 3 days to move. And so there were a lot of rapid trips with the truck, and just everything kind of poured out of the truck into this, you know, vast 7,000 square feet, my God, how will we ever fill it, space. We didn't see any need to organize anything, but that was just such utter chaos. It took a long time to kind of recover from that and reconstitute zones and storage and stuff. And part of the problem was that because there was so much space, how would we ever fill it all? Some folks had just kind of emptied their basements into the space. And we had a massive clutter problem.
So parking tickets, parking permits were an I3 invention?
As far as I know, yeah. Our president at the time, Ross Smith, kind of invented that just whole cloth, out of his head, onto paper.
How does that system work?
And so the idea is that you can't just leave everything laying around everywhere forever. That
even if you really want to.
Even if you really want to. That if everyone does that, then no one gets the benefit of a functional space.
Right.
But actual projects get finished. And so if you're working on a project that needs some space, you can reserve that space. You can get a parking permit for your big, awkward thing for a limited amount of time, for a limited amount of space. You know, okay, you're 5 by 10 and you're 90 days or whatever. And if you overstay that, or if you leave stuff sitting around without a permit on it, then you get a ticket.
When I first joined, I thought it was the most fun thing ever to give parking tickets, and actually it does not make you popular.
Okay, so I think it's awesome because everyone's hesitation in not giving tickets, like, evenly across the board, means that you get that problem of uneven enforcement, and then only, you know, like, some people get tickets and some don't, which is totally wrong.
Right.
So, yeah.
So I guess, feel free to give parking tickets.
Yeah, and a parking ticket should be seen as like, that's not something you're proud of. It means you screwed up. It means you abused the shared space.
When is the last time you had a parking ticket?
Years ago.
That's because you're the E-Lab coordinator, so all of your stuff can just go into the E-Lab.
Well, I don't have personal private stuff except what's in my locker, you know. I don't even have like a big storage plot anymore. I downsized to a locker because I realized I didn't need to keep all that stuff here.
Yeah.
And I do have a lot of personal stuff in the E-Lab, but it's all open for use.
Right.
You know, it's like the soldering irons and stuff might even still technically be mine, but they're just on the shelf for anyone to use, so they're not out of place.
For a hackerspace to succeed, it does take an incredible amount of generosity and selflessness from people.
At least to start up. And then you get into the question of hackerspace versus makerspace. But yeah, because one of the other things that we started to do, I want to say around the 2013-14 time frame, was move towards having more group-owned tools and less personal stuff. Because by that time, you know, we'd been around long enough as an organization to have some member turnover. And when a member who owns a lot of stuff leaves, you say, uh-oh, we're on a scramble to replace those tools or whatever that was. Wouldn't it have been nice if those were group owned, and then it wouldn't, you know, because member turnover is a natural thing, and it shouldn't be as painful as it was in the early days. And so the group owns more. I think the group's first big purchase was the laser cutter. And there's a whole story about how we had a laser cutter before we bought a laser cutter. But the just even the little stuff, the drill presses, the, you know, all the sort of stuff around the wood shop and machine shop are now group owned. So they're like, some of them were donated, some of them were purchased, whatever. But that's been real positive. Once in a while, this was something I noticed around the 80 to 100 member mark. We started seeing an uptick in damage where, you know, before, I mean, look, people make mistakes, stuff breaks, but it was always, hey, I made a mistake, I broke this, how can I help fix it? And around that time, we started to see, we'd find things broken and nobody had confessed to it or offered to help. And that was kind of the transition from, okay, I'm using Nick's tool and I know if I break it, I have to apologize to Nick and make it better, to, oh, I'm using this tool that was just here and there's no name or face associated with it, and if I break it, then so what? There was a lot of kind of lack of responsibility, and so we had to do a real push to remind people of the responsibility and community and how much it sucks to find your thing broken. And it did turn around. That was kind of a painful period, and it passed, and people started being awesome again. And it was just kind of a communication issue to remind. And also to point out, look, if you break something, you're not in trouble as long as you help fix it. You know, you're only in trouble if you hide it.
How did people communicate? I mean, when did like, how did people communicate back then? Was it all over email? Was it phone or?
It's never been phone. It was all email and in person. Email was really, I think there's really kind of two enabling technologies for spaces like this, which I think explains why they didn't exist, 50 or 100 years ago, which is that, in order to have a space which is not a place of employment where everyone's there at the same time, and you have like managers and stuff like that to centralize the information and communication, in order to have a space where people can come and go as they please at any time, and you don't have a paid manager, you need a way to exchange information and to communicate in two ways. One of them is asynchronously, like, I left it this way, if anybody sees this, help me figure out what I couldn't figure out why the machine was misbehaving, and use email for that, and then people respond to the email or whatever, and there was kind of a critical mass of everyone has email that happened in the 2000s really, to where that became a practical medium that you could use for everyone and not just like computer nerds. Which I think is really why Chaos and such were able to exist back in the 80s, is because they were focused on just computer nerds. I want to go back to the parking permits and tickets thing.
Excuse me.
What?
When they come back on like NPR or whatever, it's the host. Welcome back. I'm here with Nate Bezanson, and we're going to return to the topic of parking tickets and parking permits. Okay? All right.
We're going to return to the topic of borrowing things from each other and the concept of open and free patterns that spaces work with and use from each other and share. Because I was talking about Russ having come up with the system of permits and tickets, and the reason I'm gesturing over here is that we have examples of them now. They're color-coded now. They didn't always used to be. So that's a permit that like you fill out and then you have someone sign. And okay, so it shows like the date it's issued, the date it expires, and then it's like we've checked that the person is an active member. The expiration date is written long enough out that no extensions will be needed. The owner has a way to physically remove the property from I-3 when done.
That's important because sometimes people bring in really big stuff.
Or they build big stuff.
And it's like, how are you going to get that out of here?
Well, and they're like, well, it just has to sit around another 6 or 7 years until I have the truck to take it home. Not allowed. Not allowed. Anyway, so there's that. And then the ticket, if you manage to earn one of these, it's like, this project isn't stored correctly. It was left leaning and or piled up. Yada yada, and it describes how you have to like notify that you've issued a ticket and so on. But these are color coded now, and they didn't always used to be. And the reason this is an important part of the story is that we had our permits and tickets on our wiki, and we use them, and we host a party every summer, every July, for Maker Faire Detroit, which is it used to be one of the 3 official fairs, and then there were 4 official fairs with Austin, and then they pulled back to just 2, but Detroit was still a big one. And then they dissolved entirely, but whatever, Detroit Maker Faire is huge, and it draws people from all over the Midwest, all over everywhere, but a lot, within driving distance bring big stuff. And so we had folks from Minnesota who were here, from the Twin Cities Makerspace out there, TC Maker.
Twin Cities Maker.
Yeah.
Got it.
And they were like, oh, this solves a problem we have. Can we borrow this system? We said, yeah, sure. It's all Creative Commons. It's all like open.
It's open
license.
source. Like,
yeah,
what we do here is available to other people.
But like legally, it's under the Creative Commons attribution share alike license.
Really?
Yeah. So that's at the bottom of our wiki page.
Was that a decision made early on?
Super early. Yeah.
That everything was going to be open.
Yeah, and that, because like we've borrowed stuff from others that is under that same license. It's like the license that like almost everyone uses. Anyway, so TC Maker borrowed the parking permit and ticket system and improved it. They color coded them first off, And then they also have another status, which I think is called like do not hack, which is for like space infrastructure or stuff like that, where anything else is kind of default available as project fodder, but this isn't. And they've got a couple of others.
So they built on what?
Yeah, they built on it. And then their system was then borrowed by yet a third space whose name I don't know off the top of my head.
Where?
I don't know.
Oh.
Like I can dig that up, but
No, yeah.
yeah, but you know, it's now gone several hops, and then you know, like the color coding we brought back and integrated into our system. So like the you know, the Creative Commons license and open everything is really paying dividends. It's
Sharing between hackerspaces and makerspaces?
Yeah, and they didn't have to invent whole cloth a system that they saw working, because they saw it working and they could just have it without. They didn't even have to ask permission. They just did so as a you know, manners.
Is there still a centralized chat or place that all the hackerspaces meet up? All the
Yeah.
makerspaces meet?
Well, so makerspace is less so. But there's an IRC channel on Freenode called Hackerspaces.
What is IRC?
Internet Relay Chat.
Okay.
Yeah, so chat before chat is IRC.
Okay.
Like, it's the great granddaddy of it all. And like,
I assume most people who are watching know this, but I'm...
well, not everyone, and that's fair. But you're familiar with Slack.
Yes.
Slack is like a paid-for, hosted, kind of like IRC sort of thing. Like the fact that channels have a number sign at the beginning of them is IRC.
Okay.
The fact that commands begin with a slash is IRC. The fact that you can join a channel by typing /join. Slack is just hosted IRC plus pretty.
So where do the makerspaces and the hackerspaces meet online?
On Freenode on hackerspaces.
Okay.
So Freenode is an IRC network, which
Okay.
I'm not going to explain.
Is that when it's the white text on the black screen?
That depends on what client you're using, but
When I see you typing?
yes, when you see me using it, yeah,
Okay.
that's my IRC client.
Got it.
But I mean, there's hundreds of clients, and that's the cool thing about IRC is it's just a protocol. Anyone can write software to work with it. Whereas with Slack, you have to use Slack to talk to Slack. And if you don't like it, you know, it's like they just got around to adding dark mode for people that like a black background on their screen.
Yeah,
like
it changed
years.
to dark mode, and I don't know how to unchange
It's
it.
in preferences, but
Of course.
but like on IRC, you know, for the last 30 years, you've been able to write your own software and do whatever. And so there's, you know, it's that open source and anyone can change it. Kind of environment.
And not only do you put it out there for taking, you want people to take it and improve it and share what they do.
Because then you get their improvements back.
That's the next question I was going to ask is where has i3 borrowed from? Do you have any particularly good examples?
I mean, the one right in front of me is we borrowed the coloring of permits and tickets back.
But that was an improvement on our original system.
Yeah, which I think is kind of a double whammy. But
well, if that's not relevant, then tell me about some of the spaces that you've traveled to, because you have actually traveled pretty widely.
Well, only within like the U.S. and Canada.
Right.
But yeah, so most recently, let's see, I'm actually, okay, I'm lapsed, but I signed up as a member of PDX Hackerspace. In Portland.
Portland, Maine?
Portland, Oregon. PDX is the airport code out there.
Right.
And because I was out there for work for a couple of months, and it just so happened that like the Airbnb I was staying in was like walking distance from the space, which didn't just so happen. I actually kind of picked that, but and so it was really cool. They have kind of a different model. It's much more like kind of two main people really run the place, and then everyone else is members.
Are they employees? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't quite understand all of that.
PDX, if you're out there,
yeah,
let
tell
us know how you work, because we are always trying to improve our systems. I don't think it's ever in the plan that we are going to hire someone and pay them. I mean, we're a member-run space, but it is always informative to know what you're doing.
So, yeah, so I, I went to a couple of, it was like the week that Dorkbot wasn't happening.
Dorkbot?
Yeah, Dorkbot is a people doing weird things with electronics meetup.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, but I got to meet some folks whose names I knew and swap around some components and a bunch of stories and stuff. It was a really cool place to hang out. And then before that, I was out in the Bay Area, and I managed to swing by Noisebridge.
That's one of the ones you mentioned as an original.
Super old ones, but here's sort of a fascinating thing. Noisebridge is, or at least was,
Hello, Noisebridge.
Yeah, if you're watching, you guys rock. But Noisebridge was never even slightly shy about their 100% anarchist roots and goals and stuff. And I didn't follow the saga super closely, but I feel like after 7 or 8 years, that kind of came back came home to roost. I will say this: they were having more and more problems with people just squatting in the space and deciding they were living there, and some issues with the absolute lack of rules. And so Noisebridge kind of rebooted itself and has an extraordinarily i3-like set of rules now. And I don't know how much of that was actually copy-pasted, but a lot of our structure is very familiar out there now.
Noisebridge, let us know. Copy, paste, Control-C, Control-Z.
And I'm sure it was from a bunch of other spaces, because as one of the originals, they're
I was gonna say, is
everyone's.
i3 one of the originals? It sounds like it kind of is.
We're kind of like second wave.
Okay.
Post Wired article.
Right.
Whereas Noisebridge was one that the article was written about.
But they're still going?
Yeah, they're still going. So post reboot, I took photos of a bunch of really familiar stuff out there, because it's they've got the same bin of 5-volt power bricks, 12-volt power bricks, anything other than 5 or 12. It's some of these patterns just emerge. It was really funny and familiar and felt very much like home.
What about, so actually the most recent place you've traveled was Nashville, right?
Yeah.
And you visited their space, and you haven't really told me about that, so I'm curious.
Yeah, so I was only there for 2 hours, because my flight was leaving right during their Friday night tours. So I didn't really get to spend nearly as much time.
Wait, where did Friday night tours come from?
It was just an old pattern that we were in the super early days, between signing the lease and grand opening. We were there wasn't really such a thing as closed. We were just open.
But did you
Everyone
guys,
was in there.
was i3 the first Friday night tours people?
I can't answer that. Everyone's open on Friday. That's just...
It's just the Tuesday meetings?
It's even more obvious than Tuesday meetings. Even spaces that don't have meetings on Tuesday have open on Friday.
Okay.
It's a universal.
Well, clearly, but I didn't know that. Did you? Let us know.
How many spaces have you visited? Actually, that's the question.
For me?
Yeah.
One.
What?
Here.
Well, go more. There's down the block.
What's down the block?
Go to Brightmoor. Go to OCD. Omnicore. Go to Makerworks. Go to All Hands Active. There's.
Take me there.
Okay.
All right.
But yeah, so it's funny, because we're talking about Portland and San Francisco and Nashville, but it's there's also Detroit and Ann Arbor, and there's so many spaces locally that we should also talk about, because All Hands Active in Ann Arbor started up just a few months after i3, and so we were very much building and forming at the same time, and we're far enough away that we're not stealing members from each other, but close enough to go hang out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was actually cool. For a little while, we had you know, like some of their members would come regularly to our meetings and vice versa.
I think we lost signal again, checking into it. It's
Okay.
running here though, so I don't.
Oh, weird. Do we still have
Do you
audio?
want to switch to? Yeah, I lost it.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh no, there we
I don't know. Well, whatever. I'm just going to keep talking because I assume the audio is good because it's going over a different channel.
are. I know, but I really like watching this little feed.
Okay, but nobody really needs to see my ugly mug to hear the stories.
I know, but I love the ugly.
But,
Okay.
It's back.
Anyway.
I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Cool,
Thanks,
thanks.
Greg. It does take a lot of people to make anything happen. So, this live stream event was thought of by Thomas Tusano, who came up with the idea, and then built on in Slack, and now there's like a whole team here running this marathon for 72 hours. And during those 72 hours, your donation counts as 2. So say you gave $100. That would actually be matched to be $200. And that would go towards our Michigan
Economic Development Corporation match that we only get if we cross the $50,000 barrier.
But we easily will,
Mark.
since all your donations are matched to $10,000. Keep it up. Thanks, guys. Okay.
Here's hoping.
Here's hoping. Here's doing. Let's make it happen.
Okay.
Makerspace.
Yeah, or hackerspace.
So you're talking about Ann Arbor, though, and all the spaces in the
Right.
area that are...
Well, yeah, because like Michigan's a good place for it. I think we've always been a place that people make things. We've always been a place that like hands-on skills are valued.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at like the nationwide finishings of like First Robotics, like half of the top 10 teams are from Michigan. It's
Well,
always
it's the automotive industry. I mean...
well, even beyond that. I mean, we've got furniture industry, we've got chemical
There's
industry,
lots.
we've got all sorts of people make things here. So yeah, it's good. And then, but it's also, I think it's funny that the spaces all have such different character. Like All Hands Active in Ann Arbor, being in a college town, they have a lot more member turnover. A lot of their members are students, whereas we tend to have kind of a 20s, 30s. I think the majority of our membership is
Here?
20s, 30s, but but I mean, we've got members in their 60s and 70s.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel
Um,
like our membership is
it's-
actually skewed middle age. I think there's a fair amount of retirees.
Yeah,
Just
definitely.
a fair, as much as there are young people coming in. I'm not a young person anymore. I just realized that. Oh my god.
Totally are.
No, I mean, I'm 30. Anyway.
Yeah, stop right there.
There is there's a young group, a young youthful group, but I feel like our makerspace is somewhat mature.
Yeah, definitely more. I think more diverse, both in interests and skill levels and ages than most.
I don't think we have a ton of students.
No, we don't.
No.
And they're all in Ann Arbor.
I mean, actually, there's colleges and community colleges all over, and people are learning trades there. I mean, maybe we should reach out in
Okay.
some sense. That could be a recruiting thing if we're looking for new members.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of cool labs and stuff that we could go on field trips to as well. But we'll get around to it.
Okay.
But anyway, so let's see. Were we talking about travel?
I
You wanna
asked
go
you,
back on that?
about different spaces that you've been to.
Do you want to continue the list because it's a long list?
Do you? I mean, is it worth sharing?
I don't know if there are a lot of like there's a ton of stories, but I don't know how many of them are really relevant to I3.
Let me finish with 3 questions then.
Yeah.
What do you miss about the old days? What do you love about these days? And what do you imagine in 10 years?
Oh boy. Okay, so part of what I miss about the old days is, it's fun to reminisce about, but it's also maybe I wouldn't want it back that way. Was that everybody knew everybody? When the space was 20 people, or 30 people. It was like everybody was beyond just a first name basis. It was like, a lot of people knew where each other lived and hung out, outside the space and stuff like that, or just, had their friendships here. Everybody was friends, to a first approximation. There were folks that didn't necessarily get along great, but
No, but that doesn't mean anything, that everybody knew each other.
yeah.
And that really does set the stage for people not getting along or making deeper friendships.
Yeah, but for the most part, everybody did get along. But like the human brain cannot keep friendships with that many people, as many as we have now. And so these days, I walk into the space and there are strangers around. It's like there's people whose face I may have seen once or twice before, and I don't know their name. And I'll go introduce myself, but or they'll come introduce themselves to me, which is great. But it's too big a group to have that kind of like social density that we used to have. And on the one hand, okay, it's not the same as it was. But on the other hand, it's awesome because it means there's even more diversity of ideas and interesting stuff going on, and more opportunities to get involved with, there's a better way to do that, or can I learn what you're doing over there, or do you want me to show you how I did something similar last week, or whatever. And that's just those possibilities are just multiplied with a larger membership. So
that sounds like kind of like what you like about today.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I like about today. Another thing I like is that, and it's kind of weird that you don't have to explain what a makerspace is to like someone on the street. They just know.
I still do.
Okay, well, I'm sure there are people who haven't heard of it, but an awful lot
Yeah.
more have now than used to.
Oh, definitely.
And it's cool because it means the conversation can immediately go to more productive stuff like, oh, what do you do there? Or, what can I do there? Or what makes this one interesting? Whereas, used to be, you'd be getting off at your floor and you haven't even finished explaining to the elevator, what it means to have all these people and tools and doing this stuff, These days you can skip that. So that's cool. And the question of where we're going to be in 10 years is something I think Charlie nailed it. A couple of years ago, actually, we were talking about this.
Charlie.
Charlie Reisenga, one of our past presidents. I think he's 3 presidents ago now. I don't remember, but...
He's a fun, sprightly character.
Oh my God, Charlie's great.
He really is.
But, and we work together, so it's cool. Like, I'm down the hall from his desk. But
oh yeah.
Oh, we'll talk about jobs.
I was gonna say,
yeah.
I was trying to close it with 3 questions, but there's more.
I could talk for a week, seriously, but no. Anyway, but Charlie pointed out, I think in the future, makerspaces are going to be kind of like churches, in that there'll be several in every town, and they won't compete with each other. There'll be kind of like different denominations, it'll be like there'll be ones that are more, community and member driven like us, and there'll be ones that are a little bit more corporate or, affiliated with colleges and stuff like that. And so everybody will be able to go to the one that kind of fits their flavor of where they feel like they fit. And I think that the really cool thing is I've always talked about, we're a community-based organization. But is that a geographic community? Do we serve every single person who lives within 10 miles? I don't think so. I think we serve the do-it-yourself people who live within 30 miles or something.
Yeah, who find you on Google, who find us on Google, which...
Yeah, or who, through word of mouth or whatever. But, we don't serve people who have no interest in what we do. And I think that's... again, the church analogy kind of sticks. It's like,
yeah.
I live down the block from a giant church, but I am not of their community in terms of, like, I don't go there.
Yeah, it's not geographic. It really is about interest.
It's about interest, and that's that's super important, I think, to have our mind on when we're trying to figure out, when we do community outreach and stuff like that. Is that geographic community outreach, or is that interest community outreach?
Community, let us know. Would you like us to reach out to you geographically or by your interests? Leave a comment below.
To the
Oh.
side.
Oh.
But,
So he actually thinks people are commenting. I'm just saying this.
no, I'm joking. But anyways,
So now you're going to be watching yourself.
yeah, it's kind of weird. There's a delay. That's strange. But,
Yeah, no, it's strange and only I can see it.
okay, fine. Looking forward. So looking forward 10 years from now, let's see. I hope we clean up our rules and bylaws and stuff like that to kind of make the machinery move smoother. That's already kind of in progress. We've been through a few, rounds of that tinkering.
But I feel like it's the same group of people all the time. I feel like time is required
Yeah.
to kind of have a shift.
Yeah, people age out and turn over, and yeah, member turnover is part of kind of institutional change. So
Well,
yeah.
leadership turnover as well.
Yeah, that too. And I was just looking at this the other night.
That's right. You were
There's-
trying to make the Boston or the yellow or the whatever graph.
Yeah, I don't remember what that graph is called, but it's like, I see it on Wikipedia where my favorite use of this kind of chart is like the members of a band over the years. Like, this person has been a vocalist forever, and then this
Yeah,
person was a guitarist,
drums.
and this person was a guitarist, and then this person, and so on. And so I think Mike actually put this together so you
Yeah.
can see like who our leadership was. And it's like there's a huge, it was like mostly the same people for the first 2, 3, 4 years, and then kind of a huge turmoil time, and then it's been mostly the same people since. But those, and I don't mean, there's still been turnover, but there was a lot more for a little while there. And so we'll probably go through more periods like that. But hopefully it'll be turnover for good reasons. I mean, a lot of the other founders have, gone off and started businesses, or, had kids and don't have time for the space anymore, and moved away for jobs and stuff like that. Those are good reasons. You don't want people leaving because, oh, you suck and I'm gonna go, take my toys and go home, or whatever. You don't want people leaving for acrimonious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But turnover is necessary and healthy. And so, I think 10 years out, we will be, almost entirely turned over again. And hopefully, we will have rules and procedures and customs and stuff that make that smooth and easy and healthy and natural, and not kind of awkward and, is that written down anywhere, like it is now? Because there's a lot of stuff that we do that isn't written down that should be. And there's a lot of room to improve those things. But in terms of like what we do and who we do it for and how it works, I think stay the course. I think it's working super well.
On a scale of 1 to 10, like how proud of I3 are you as part of your life?
Oh boy. I listed on my resume.
Oh, of course. You're-
Yeah, it's a total 10.
Yeah.
It's a total 10. But like it's such a huge part of my life. It's my, I mean, I got the job. I'm about to celebrate 10 years at my job that I got through a connection made at I3.
And how many other people at I3 now work at your job?
Right now, 5 or 6, but over the years, it's like I've referred, or people that I've referred have referred. I believe it was 19 or 20 last I looked.
Really?
It's this huge.
Are we saying the name? Okay.
But it's this huge,
Networking.
My employer, yeah, it's beyond networking though. It's like my employer has a need for people with hands-on skills and the
Critical
ability
thinking.
to, critical thinking and the ability to, analyze a problem and break it down with very little guidance, and, work from incomplete information and clean up after themselves, because, if a lot of operations all over the place and stuff like that. And I can see that walking around here when I see, a member working on a project and they've done something interesting and they're documenting it without being told to, and they're cleaning up without being told to. I'll be like, I want you on my team. And that, it's like the world's best job interview, and so I've extended.
That's true.
I've extended that offer to a lot of people. Are you working right now? You looking for something else?
Yeah.
Let's talk. And yeah.
Makerspace is one of those places, you don't know where to meet people. You're wondering, how do I meet people? You don't want to go to the bar, you don't go to church, whatever. If you want a really specific group of incredibly smart people, creative thinkers, then you'll find yourself in your local maker or hackerspace.
Probably. And if you don't have one, start one.
He'll help you. He'll love to help you. Email nateb@startmakerspace.com.
No. And Bizanson at i3detroit.org.
nbizanson@i3detroit.org.
Or just contact at i3detroit.org.
Yeah, he takes care of this stuff. And that really is amazing, though. You have been a steward of i3 for its entire life. And you are the only founder who has been actively involved the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Matt Switlick counts. He's not as involved, but I mean, he's like next door right now setting up robots.
Literally,
so,
he's here?
I'm pretty sure.
We should go meet him.
He was here like yesterday, and I'm not sure he's
so
here
he
right
doesn't
now.
want
Anyway,
to take credit for all of this,
anyway.
but literally hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, and the touch. You've got the touch. Leadership, skills, knowledge, organizational.
Working on developing it.
Yeah.
A lot of that development has happened courtesy of i3.
I was gonna say. I mean, you still see room for improvement.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think nobody should sit down and rest, except when you're tired. But like, there's always improvement to be made. Yeah.
And on that note, I'd like to thank.
Are we gonna wrap?
I mean, wait, we're going to take a secret intermission. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Oh boy. Let's see. I could talk about.
I asked
more.
if there's anything else he'd like to say.
Yeah, I could talk about travel. I could talk about some of the stuff, like contests and stuff that we've been involved in over the years. I could talk about. Just carry the camera into the electronics lab.
That's what I was gonna say. Maybe we need to go on a field trip. Can we get our guys in charge in here?
Our stream helpers.
The stream leaders. They're not helpers. We are the guests on your stream. Can we get someone in here? Help. I need an adult. There we go.
Doesn't she have a great laugh?
Don't I?
I just nodded.
Did he?
I don't know what's going on with the power. I think it's been charging, right?
Yeah.
We can always switch
it's been
cameras,
streaming,
too.
But one thing I think definitely needs to happen is the E-Lab, a tour.
Yeah, but that doesn't have to be like right now. We could break for other stream stuff. Take 5.
Yeah,
or-
Should we have another intermission?
Sure.
Let's do that. Bye, guys.